Looks like we're live.
That's good. Alrighty, hello, everybody, and welcome. Glad to have you. Thanks for tuning in to Tuesday Night Live. We are live. We are the longest running program here on the Good Shepherd live streaming network. So, welcome to everyone.
ESLNN.
I'm Father Kent O'Connor here, the pastor at Good Shepherd. And who's that over there to the other side of me?
My name is Michael Sheeran, parishioner at Good Shepherd and part-time MC.
Excellent, very good. Mike with a mic, I believe you're called.
Yeah. Sometimes when I have a mic.
Excellent. And we have a special guest here today. I'm going to switch over to our 6-foot distant camera here. This guy here, I'll put the microphone a little bit closer to him. He's just going to be here for a minute. But look who we got. We've
Hello.
Deacon Steve here with us. Show off your hat there that you got.
This was a gift from my wife that says officially retired. And for those that don't know, today is my last work day and my last ministry day at Good Shepherd after 12 years of employment and 3 years of ministry as a deacon.
So it's been a blessing to have you here with us, Deacon Steve. And I'll go back to my camera for just a moment here. So I just pulled him. He was just packing up stuff down the hall, and I just said, "Why don't you just come down and just wave goodbye to folks?" And so I just pulled him down here. And before we get into our topic of the evening, which is stealing, thou shalt not steal. So, Deacon Steve, you're not stealing.
There's no connection to my being here and packing up, is there?
No.
Whatever. You're stealing all the thunder. Come on now.
Gosh.
Do you have anything that you'd like to say to the folks here, but on your way out, on your swan song or whatever?
Well, thank you to both of you for inviting me in for a few minutes. All I would like to say is thank you to the parish and to the pastors I've worked for over the 12 years. Thank you for allowing me to be part of your parish for 12 years and for 3 years to serve you as a deacon. It's been an honor and a privilege for both Marilyn, my wife, and I can't tell you how it's challenging to leave, but it's time for me to make that evolution in my life. And so I love every hour of the work I've done here, and there's so many people I love and truly will miss, and thank you.
All right. Yeah. Well, thanks, Deacon Steve. We're very blessed. You had a question for him that you asked him.
I did. So I guess you're transitioning over. You're going to be the deacon at Holy Trinity.
Yes.
And excited, nervous, any feelings?
Well, yes, I have feelings, but not nervous at all. This is, I'm 65 years old. It's time for my career to transition. And it's Holy Trinity has been mine and Marilyn's parish since we moved to Kansas 35 years ago. My children went to school there from preschool through 8th grade. I'm a convert. I came into the church at Easter Vigil of 1994 there, and it just seems like it's our Kansas Catholic home, and it's a good place for us to go as we move into retirement. So no no doubts at all.
Awesome.
Well, we're going to miss you in a number of ways, from getting to work with you on the Finance Council to getting to hear your homilies to, man, you've baptized, you've married, you get to do all those wonderful stuff. But just thank you so much, Deacon Steve, for all of your service on behalf of me and the other parishioners.
An excellent homilist,
Thank you.
too. An
Thank
excellent
you.
homilist.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And I do have one more homily opportunity that's officially on the books, that Sunday, July 12th. Because of some family situations, I wasn't able to be here a week ago Sunday to preach as planned. And so Father has graciously offered me an opportunity to preach again in July, and it'll be at 8 and 10 o'clock on Sunday, July 12th. So maybe I'll see you in the pews, or you'll see us live streaming from Mass.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Deacon Steve.
Thank you.
And happy retirement to you. And probably by the time we finish this episode, you will be, you will be.
I might be watching you from home.
That's right.
Goodbye to all. Good
All
night.
right. Thank you, Deacon Steve. Yay. All right. So back here we are. So great to have Deacon Steve just pop in for a little bit. Just a spontaneous kind of thing to have him join us for just a little piece while he was packing up his stuff and said, "Hey, come on down the hall." So, well, welcome
Yeah.
everyone. What we have been doing here, let me pull my microphone closer again.
Sure. What we have been doing here over the last 6 episodes is going through the commandments. Tonight, we are going to be diving into Article 7, the 7th commandment, "You shall not steal."
That's
And
right.
much like the theme of the previous videos into this, we're going to be talking about kind of the worldly implications of this, but more importantly, we're going to expand it beyond what people tend to understand about this and really take it back to the catechism. So we'll be using the catechism as a part of this. If you would like to follow along, this is in 2401.
Hold on, I think I
Paragraph.
put up the Facebook. I think I lost my page here. So just give me just 1 second.
That's okay. That's okay. So yeah, if you're looking for what the catechism, what's that? This is your Reader's Digest of everything that the church teaches and why. My spine of mine is starting to look a whole lot more like the spines of yours as we're working through this, or lack thereof, of the front and back covers.
Spineless.
One of these days, we're going to get you a hardback.
Well, I think I had one at one point. Actually, well, and I've got my Spanish one over there. But that's not particularly.
You had one at one point, but they fell off, both the front and the back covers.
No, not on this one, but
You turn them enough, they all become the soft covers, huh?
Right.
But
So-
yeah,
we
we
generally
had a-
think about in the commandments, as we often think about, like thou shalt not steal. We generally think, okay, as maybe we do an examination of conscience, it's like, well, I haven't stolen anything, I haven't taken anything, I haven't gone to the grocery store and walked out with a head of lettuce or anything. I've been honest about that. But as the Catechism does, it goes through a broader understanding, and it's just a really beautiful way that these things are tied in to the commandments and things that we wouldn't necessarily think about.
Sure.
For instance, we talk a lot about social justice, and the principles of Catholic social teaching are really beautiful.
Yeah.
And one of those, if you look on 2403, it talks about private property, which is a right, and sometimes people think, that's not Catholic teaching. It is, private property. It is something that is good. But as it says in 2403, that we can't forget that even though we might have the right to private property, it's still not exactly ours. It's still what we share in that gift that comes from God. And so we always need to remember that the stewardship, good stewardship, means taking care of the gifts that God has given us, be that financial stewardship, be that the stewardship of the land, stewardship of our time, all of those things. Those are all gifts that we don't possess on our own, but we do have the right to private property. And so that's one thing that it talks about there in this section. And then therefore, where it says, if you look on 2409 here, where it's talking about the section about respecting the goods of others, willfully damaging, right here, or hopefully my my cursor is there. In 2409, at the very bottom, willfully damaging private or public property is contrary to the moral law and requires reparation. And we're seeing a lot of that, today with the various protests and riots. And as we talked about earlier, a couple of weeks ago, I mean, that is a right of people to protest and to stand up. But when it moves into an area of destruction of private property, when it moves into an area of stealing, of looting, right? So looting is never something that is morally acceptable. There's never a time that you just go in and like just take stuff that doesn't belong to you. I guess, I mean, in the absence of like flood is coming to destroy stuff anyway, and so you take stuff. I suppose that might be, but that's not the topic for today, I suppose. But
Yeah.
But going in and looting, and I'm not necessarily saying also there's a connection to these groups, so don't hear me wrong, but what people have been seeing on television or on their social media is people taking stuff that doesn't belong to them or destroying stuff that doesn't belong to them. And Catechism is saying that that's in this piece of do not steal.
Yeah, and there's both a respect for the person, but also respect for their goods. So one is about obviously it's not okay to not steal, but it's also not okay to damage the property just because, like what we're seeing with the beheading of the statues and things, just because you don't agree. The point at which you riot and are essentially, you've moved from structured, aligned protesting, and you've gone into destruction of property, destruction of businesses, livelihood, things that were not even associated to your presence. You're burning down buildings. You've essentially nullified any level of a classy voice that you may have had for whatever it was you were trying to accomplish, because I love the phrase right here at the very beginning. It's at the end of 2401. It says, Christian life strives to order this world's goods to God and to fraternal charity. And if we're destroying the goods of someone else, that doesn't really line up with fraternal charity. There's no fraternity there within any form of charity. It's right the very last sentence of 2401. Christian life strives to order this world's goods to God and to fraternal charity. So we are given property, we are given possessions so that we might share it and do well with it. It is not for the purposes of essentially hoarding for the sake of hoarding, right? But then if you go to 2406, it does talk about political authority. Political authority has the right and duty to regulate the legitimate exercise of the right to ownership for the sake of the common good. And so the church supports the fact that we have police officers that track down people if they're stealing, or if they're if they're breaking and entering into people's property and taking their money or taking their possessions, which is contrary to the Christian life, right? The taking of that which is not yours is completely the opposite of giving that which you can give from either the lack or from the wealth. Yeah. So it's really a beautiful portion here, but then we can also look at property in the form of our most limited form of property, which is time.
Right.
Which is time. And I think that governs within our words, right? If you were to say, I can help you accomplish something, I would love to help you accomplish something. There's that portion in scripture where the son that said he would not do the father's commands and goes and does it anyway. And then the son who said he would, but then didn't, right? We always want to be in the category of the one that under promises and over delivers. I don't think
you want to be in either. I don't think either one of those.
Yeah. I mean, if you're falling to one, it would be better to be in the one that says, I cannot, because your word is your bond. But right here in 24:10, it says promises must be kept and contracts strictly observed to the extent that the commitments made in them are morally just.
Right. So, and I think that's great. Like for like employment, this goes into, it also talks about, so that we're at 2410 there about promises and contracts. And then later on, it talks about just wage. That all fits in. Where is that? Okay. So 2434, I'm going to bop forward a little bit here and then I'm going to bop back. But 2434. So if you don't pay someone a just wage, that fits in with stealing. You are stealing their time and not paying them justly for it. Is the idea is you have not justly compensated for the work that has been done. But like, so for employment, so like Deacon Steve, he just retired, right? So we had to, we had to pay him a just wage. But most of our employees, like at the church, are not on a contract, but they are in agreement that that unless something happens that they fault on their employment, then we can't just unfairly fire somebody. Like our teachers, however, though, are on contracts, right? But those are to be held and honored, and so you have a year contract so you honor that contract. And unless there is something really weird going on that's morally objectionable or something, that contract needs to be honored.
Yeah. The other part of this is when you're out in the secular world, obviously in the for-profit sector or even in the non-for-profit sector, there comes a time usually every year for most people, sometimes twice a year for some jobs, where you have to renegotiate your compensation. At times like now, there are countless people that have been let go from their employment,
right,
due to the fact that either the employer said, we're at risk of shutting if I do not let you go. And I do have a responsibility to keep my business open as best I can. But the point at which, executives are saying, well, we need to keep our bonuses because we all want to keep our bonuses. And in order to keep those bonuses, we're going to lay off 20% of our employees. That's where you start running into a.
That was Deacon Steve. He just saluted, and I saluted him. He tipped his hat, I think, is what he did.
We should, if we can do like a greatest hits roll, I want to have that as your sign off, slow motion. The American. But the goal, obviously, of going to work is to earn a just wage. And it is the responsibility of both the employer and the employee to do their best in order to negotiate for a fair wage. And not to the point where you're putting the business at risk because you're demanding so much money in order for the work that you do. But if you're a key employee and essentially, I've heard of this often where, for example, there could be an exemplary employee and they win a trip and their supervisor takes their trip, saying, it was really me that, sculpted you into this. So I deserve my override for the work that you've done. That goes in exact contrary. If there's, for example, let's say there's a sales contest or something. And if you sell this much, the company is incentivizing those hard works for you to go on a trip with your family. And your manager says, I think I'm going to take that trip for us this year, but you keep up the good work. I'm sure next year you'll earn it. And then it just becomes this repeating cycle. Something like that actually happened to my father, which led him to open his own business because he said, it's been 3 years in a row. I've earned my trip for the company and you've taken it. And there's nothing that you could do faster to take the wind out of the sails of a hard worker than to take the reward of their hard work away.
Yeah, that's great.
There's a motivation aspect there, but there's really just a human decency of if someone's putting in extra effort in order to accomplish something for you, if there's no traffic on the extra mile, then that extra mile should be compensated extra.
Yeah, that's excellent. And thanks for sharing that personal story too of your dad. Yeah. That goes directly against the Catholic social teaching. Okay, so then what else is in this little section here? There's so much. We can't talk about everything. We're just kind of talking about some highlights and some things that struck us. A couple things.
Go ahead. since we're on we've talked about the little rioting part, I want to just talk about some sort of baseline. So stealing, oftentimes there's unspoken contracts of being a citizen of a community.
Okay.
So owning a car, your word for owning that car and being permitted a driver's license says that I'm going to honor the laws of the road. I'm going to drive under the speed limit. I'm going to drive on the right side of the road. I'm going to stop at traffic lights, right? But essentially, you could kind of steal the safety of others if you violate those social contracts.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's there's a morality portion there, obviously, but oftentimes people will say, well, why don't you speed? Well, because I believe in the spirit of the laws, that they're designed to keep me safe, and I just want to be the best citizen I could. Or somebody could say, well, I don't want to get a ticket. One may be a morally superior reason for doing so, but they're both achieving the same end. So it's important when you look at something such as moral laws like don't destroy property, don't burn down somebody's business. You understand that I'm not just not doing that because I don't want to go to jail. It's not like I'm afraid of the punishment. I'm doing it because I believe that the community operates best when I work within my civic responsibilities, because I'm given the freedom to go and do terrible things, but me not choosing not to do those terrible things is an exercise of free will in line with what my civic contracts would be as a citizen of municipality or state or just the country.
Great. That's a great perspective too. Let me also just mention here, if you're watching on the tube and on the Facebook, if you have any questions, feel free to type them on in. We'll try to address them as we see them. So if you have any questions, we're talking about this part in the Catechism about thou shalt not steal and the various things that come about in this section. Yeah, you were saying something about the
social contracts.
Yeah, the social. Oh, well, like the whole idea of like freedom, right? And so there's the talks. People are talking back and forth about masks or whatever, and I think that
Sure.
That fits into a certain degree as well. Of that as you enter in this contract, the understanding, and people disagree or whatever, but the general understanding. So, is it fair that 35 miles per hour, is that a just law? Well, that can be debated. That's true. And people can just say, I'm going to drive 50 because that's what I feel. Well, the contract that you've entered into is that you're going to obey what is posted there and trusting these authorities to make these decisions to say, I'm going to go 35 miles an hour. And this is what we feel in this area is the safe method. You might say, I can drive 50.
Can you scoot your microphone closer just a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So, so the, is that better?
Yeah, much better. So 35 miles an hour. Go ahead.
So you have the law says 35 miles an hour, and I am in the contract to agree with that, and I'm going to say I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
So I think a similar thing is like with the masks, and people are saying I don't want to wear a mask, and the science doesn't match or whatever. But
yeah,
that's what the law is for now in Kansas, and we might argue that it's an unjust law, but our default setting generally wants to be is they are. People question this, of course, but they are trying to look out for the common good and trying to protect the citizens. Can I drive safely 50 miles an hour down Flum? Maybe, but the experts have said on that hilly road, not a good idea. Drive 35. So in that kind of similar.
Yeah, and those experts put a little speed trap on there just to make sure that you align with what their recommendations are.
So a couple other things that jumped out to me, just as we're just kind of going through here. Brief thing. It talks about gambling and games of chance in this thing, and games of chance. So 24:13. Just bring that up here on the share. 24:13 with the games of chance. I think it's mostly talking about like casinos. I mean, I like obviously playing card games and stuff, but I think it's mostly talking about gambling. It says that They are not in themselves contrary to justice. They become morally unacceptable when they deprive someone of what is of necessary. And so, people, obviously, gambling addiction, it's a real thing, and people really struggle with that. And so, that can be a problem. But the problem is not in the gambling itself, because that can be a way to enjoy an evening out with friends. If that's what your thing is,
Sure.
if you set proper limits and everything. You know, if you spend $20 to go see a movie, that's your thing. Someone spends $20 to go to a casino. I mean, casinos aren't my thing, but they are the people. And for some people, especially like the elderly, I think that's a great outing to let them go do that. It's a safe, contained environment and everything. So just mentioning that because people have questions about that sometimes. And then also about the respect for creation, which is in the very next section.
Yeah.
About and Pope Francis wrote about that recently in the encyclical. I think that's Laudato Si, the respect for God's creation. So here's just a little piece in the catechism about that, and with respect to animals. Again, these are not things that you would necessarily think. This is the thou shalt not steal section. But that we don't steal from God's creation just for the heck of it. But as it says in 24:17, that God entrusted animals to humanity. The premise is that humanity is the high point of God's creation, right? We are not at a level playing field, right? That we are all the same here, right?
No.
We have been given a body and soul.
And this is a dangerous one, because oftentimes people see dogs and cats as members of the family, and it's
Exactly. Right.
I don't want to discourage people from having pets, but the point at which you see a dog as superior to a human being, something's gone wrong. It's the same as an addiction to gambling or hierarching like something above its place, right? This can be fun as a pastime, but if you're essentially betting your food from the table that you're supposed to feed your children with, something's gone horribly wrong. Or the point at which you think that animal rights should be superior to the rights of humans, or essentially anyone that does harm to animals, for example, in like a sport of hunting, that these people should be killed or shot or anything like that. That's just wrong. Because humans, like you were saying, in the hierarchy of creation, humans are at the apex, but there is a responsibility associated with that, where you're not, having dog fights, using animals for sadistic or gross pleasures or anything like that. It is using it in a responsible manner. Oftentimes when people talk about their reason for moving to like a vegan diet is because of the cruelty in meat treatment plants, according to specific animals, chickens or cows, or hey, they should be able to roam free, or there's a like natural impacts where the soil around the area is actually having runoff and contaminating a stream that's killing fish downstream. Like there's moral repercussions for stealing the resources of a creature and then not disposing of the waste of that creature if you're running a business, and causing either the destruction of somebody's property down the way or the death of the creatures that maybe lived in that stream. So there's responsibilities within that construct as well.
So like what it says right there in the Catechism 24:18, it is contrary to human dignity to cause animals, interesting, it's contrary to human dignity, right? To cause animals to suffer or die needlessly. So just reckless killing, right? But then it says also at the bottom, it says one can love animals, one should not direct to them the affection due only to persons, right? So that's what you're getting to with like, this is my fourth child, my cat.
Yeah, this is my fur baby.
But I mean, I get it too, because I that's, one of the reasons I don't have a dog. I love dogs. I call myself a poochman. But I don't have a dog myself is because they can you can develop attachment to them. So I get it. And I love having.
I've had 4.
Yeah.
I've had 4. I love them all equally. Actually, there was one that I think was my favorite. But the point is that if your love for an animal supersedes your love for humanity, something's gone wrong.
Right. Right. So that's just that piece in the animals, and then talking about food and clothing. That's that's part of what God put animals here for. Again, with the respectful use of those things and responsible. And I mean, we can get it. We could go all on a big rabbit hole about deforestation or whatever. And that's
Here we go.
right? So I'm not going into that, but the idea is you properly take care of the earth and you have good practices. I mean, we need wood to build houses, to make paper or whatever. So how do we do this in a responsible way?
Yeah. And if, you know, a lot of times I was actually, I'm probably one of those millennials that would totally live in a tiny house, container home, whatever. And a lot of times people will say, well, I'm doing a container home because this container would just end up at a junkyard somewhere or in a landfill, and I'm sort of rescuing this container. Well, that's true. But if you're essentially tripling the amount of natural imprint in the world because you're using 15 new containers that could be out using they were created for a specific purpose for shipping, right? You know, there's kind of a fine line there of saying, well, this is a more sustainable alternative. Well, if you're using a brand new container and it's got to be customized and custom ordered and fit and designed specifically for, you know, sort of this vanity of vanities within the home, you have to govern that as well, because you know, the worship of objects it turns out that's a thing too. And we'll talk about that in future.
I don't really know what this container home is. I don't know. I'll have to Google.
You've never heard of a container home?
No.
It's where they buy these shipping containers that are on ships, right? That
No, I picture that. Yeah, they see them on the trains.
Yeah, and so essentially people buy those, and they'll buy like 2 or 3 of them. They'll cut holes in them, weld them, and then essentially because the outside is already, you know, due to the paint and the steel and the exterior, if it's you know, has holes in it, they'll have to treat it and fix it. But they'll use it and kind of use it as the structure of a home, and then maybe build like a roof and a separate area in between them. So it's essentially using a material in order to create a smaller or a tiny home from it.
I see.
So now you know.
Yes, we got one of those containers as a storage shed, and it did not work very well as a storage shed because there's no holes in it and it didn't breathe, and the lawnmower, everything smelled like gas. So it's not. Okay, so that's that.
Why do I have this old flame lantern in this gas box? Yeah.
Right. It talks more about the that work is something that is good. So in 24:26, it talks about that that work is good for us. But work, as it says in 24:28, I'll get up here. It says work right here. Work is for man, not man for work. And again, this is the Catechism uses what's called sometimes exclusive language. So man meaning the humanity, right? So work is for man, not man for work. So work is meant to help us to live a good and dignified work. And it talks about unemployment in 24:36. It always wounds. It's a very interesting way the Catechism talks about it. It wounds the victim's dignity, right? So you're a victim of unemployment. So it's a different way of kind of thinking about that. But if you do not have work, which is something that is good for you, and if that has been denied of you, that is an injustice. And the society needs to be working for ways to decrease unemployment for the purpose, not for the gross natural product, whatever that thing is, but for the good of its members, that it is good for us to work. If, you know, what's that phrase? Idle work is a devil's workshop, or idle hands are the devil's workshop, or whatever. It's not good for us just to sit and watch Netflix all day. It's good for us to work.
And it separates us from our dignity. Oftentimes, I hear this phrase at least muttered towards people when they're out of work for a long period of time, and it's been maybe voluntary that they've been out of work for the extent of length. But I'd rather just use, so whenever we're talking about sort of the dignity of work and kind of the purpose that it brings to life, right? I just don't think he has a purpose right now to get out of bed, right? Maybe he's afraid or just doesn't know what he's living for. But this is from I believe it's Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 9 and on. It says, "What advantage has the worker from his toil? I have considered the task which God has appointed for men to be busied about. He has made everything appropriate to its time and has put the timeless into their hearts without men's ever discovering from beginning to end the work which God has done. I recognize that there is nothing better than to be glad and to do well during life. For every man, moreover, to eat and drink and enjoy the fruit of all his labor is a gift of God." Right? I love it when things just make sense. And for me, that was one of those things where, I think oftentimes when men are separated from their work, which, being a retirement planner for my job, oftentimes I'm trying to help people get to the point where they don't have to go to work anymore.
Right.
But
Like Deacon Steve.
Right? And the joy that comes from the point at which they've financially got to the point where they don't have to work specifically for a paycheck because they've saved enough that they can financially stop working. But the question I always ask my clients is, not necessarily what are you retiring from, but what are you retiring to? Because if you go to too blank a slate, oftentimes you'll find those guys maybe 4 and 5 months later, and they've lost a bit of their identity.
Right.
And so, but there's a fine line between having your identity in your work and being a workaholic, having only your identity of I'm this producer in this capacity, because the relationships that are most important are those of our family, those with God, right? Those with our spouse. And if our relationship with work has superseded its place, right? What was the phrase? Man is made for work, not work for, or work is made for man, not man made for work.
Right.
Those things have flipped, and there's a loss kind of self at that point, which is dangerous. So what advantage has the worker from his toil? And I recognize that there is nothing better than to be glad and to do well in life. For man, moreover, to eat and drink and enjoy the fruit of all his labor is a gift of God. Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And it's also that a time to love, a time to hate, a time to speak, a time for war. Turn.
Yep. The birds.
The birds. The mamas and the papas.
That's we're talking about too. It's something that I have as a basic practice is that I try not to ask people what they do. That's my, it's a general thing when I'm like talking to someone or being introduced to somebody. I try not to ask the question, "So what do you do?" Because we often do that, right? It's a natural next question. So, "Hi, I'm Father Kent," or it's pretty obvious with me, but it's like, "Hey, I'm Michael." "Oh, great. Well, what do you do?" But see, then
I play the guitar. I chase my kids. I really make a decent fajita, like in a propane wok. Make a decent salsa. I also like to play guitar.
Those are all good answers.
Yeah.
But sometimes, we identify there in our work, and that's our only identity. And so I try to avoid that question because yes, before we are workers, we are husbands, wives, fathers, mothers, sons, daughters, uncles.
Yeah. So the best part of that is when people start having fun with that. What do you do? Oh, things to keep me busy. What do you do? And honestly, that's it's part of our culture is we really, as Americans, we value people a lot more sometimes if they do more important work or less important work. And it shapes our vision of them. But the thing is, the work that you do has no change in the value in your eyes of God, right? The only thing we can do is do work that is fulfilling, and brings about as much of God's glory, right? To do something for the glory of God and to earn a just wage.
It's an interesting thing that, I sometimes go to these board game conventions, which I'm not going to this year because everything is canceled.
Everything
is canceled.
It's not fun. Everything is canceled.
Everything that's cool that you wanted to do, it's all canceled. But
Except for Tuesday Night Live.
that's
We
right.
just transitioned to social distancing.
But anyway, I go to these board game conventions, and it's interesting. I don't generally wear my priest clothes because I'm on vacation, and it's rare that somebody asks me what I do, and I always tell them I'm a Catholic priest. But it is kind of rare. It's interesting in the nerdy community, and maybe it's because we're all on vacation. We don't want to be thinking about work or whatever. We don't tend to ask that question of, well, what do you do? People are just interested in playing the game or talking
Yeah,
about.
it's where are you from? It's give me your origin story a little bit more.
Yeah.
I mean, for right now, Susan Kavanaugh just finished her ironing. So what do you
Yeah.
do? Well, I finished my ironing. I'm going to hang up the clothes. Mary Raymond, what do you do? I wish people a good evening on Tuesday Night Live. So you just get these wonderful participants that are doing their part to make this show collaborative.
That's right. And then the last piece talks about the rich and the poor, and even on the national level, and the importance of the love for the poor, and making sure that we are honoring them, and not, the Jewish mindset, as I understand it, is what was the problem of being wealthy was because the idea was that you were stealing from those that didn't have anything. So if you were poor, it was because the wealthy stole from you. Now, our modern mindset, that sounds like communism, well, all the same or whatever, but
Yeah.
it's more ancient than that. And the Jewish sensibilities was, it was kind of a shame or an embarrassment if you were, well, not a shame, I guess, but if you were like filthy rich, whose money were you taking? And that's not fair, and that's not just. That the money should be shared. And if you have these gifts, if you've been given these things to be a good steward of, those things are meant to be shared with the poor, both on the personal level and on the national level. So that might be the kind of the stereotypic Republican Democratic split there, that the Republican says it should all be on the person, that they should do everything, that the Democratic, it should be the government should tell people to do this. So somewhere in between that.
And it's a hard place to be, because oftentimes you have people on the left that will say, I'm really concerned about the rights of this certain group. And the people on the right are going, well, whose responsibility is it for them to have, if they want those rights, who will be responsible for providing for that right?
Mm-hmm.
And one is concerned more about the responsibilities associated with that right, and one's more concerned about having the right and then figuring out the responsibilities as it goes. It doesn't mean that one is preferential to the other, but the point of this is to grow in an understanding of, if I do have a right, then I have an inherent responsibility with it. And I really like what it says right here in 2441, an increased sense of.
Let me get just to get
24. Sure. Sorry, I'm moving too fast.
Oh yeah.
2440 and 2441 really talk about this well, but I'll start with 2441. An increased sense of God and an increased self-awareness are fundamental to any full development of human society. Right? First sentence of 2441. And it makes for growth and respect for cultural identities and openness to the transcendent. It's essentially saying that as we grow in our knowledge and our sense of God and our sense of self-awareness, we help develop the society that we're a part of. So being essentially, I don't pay attention to anything going on in relevant culture, and being completely oblivious to this, it doesn't grow your sense of God or your sense of self-awareness. But at the same time, if you're making your entire notion about being aware of what's going on in the world, and so much so that you're actually avoiding the relationships that are directly yours because you're so, maybe you're so tied into Facebook, or you're so tied into the relationships that are in a social media capacity that you don't actually foster any real personal one-on-one relationships. You're not growing in any self-awareness, and you're not growing in any sense of God, because you're an island. Even though you may be interacting with people in a digital means, you're not growing in relationship. And that's a really hard line to be.
Yep.
The other part here that I think is I hope you appreciate this because I think you were going to brush over it, but I want to bring it up. 2442, it is not the role of the pastors of the church to intervene directly in the political structuring and organization of social life. This task is part of the vocation of the lay faithful, acting on their own initiative with their fellow citizens. Social action can assume various concrete forms. It should always have the common good in view and be in conformity with the message of the gospel and the teaching of the church.
Yep.
So as much as Father Kent, you'd say, Father Kent, why don't you do something about this? Check paragraph 2442 of the Catechism. It clearly states that it's not his job to go out and fix the structure of the political state of our country. No, that's the job of the lay. He can't also be a governor and at the same time pastor to his flock at the parish equally well.
Right. I think that's what that's great to make mention of that. I am not all priests have their different passions, gifts. I am not politically gifted. I am not, I can't keep up with all that stuff. And it doesn't really have an interest for me. Some priests love that, and that's kind of their passions, and go for it. But that's not my thing. But it also doesn't have to be. And it can be. I mean, it's not really our job. The Second Vatican Council really wanted to empower the laity. And I think people maybe mistook that and said, well, what is church? Well, church is the Mass on Sunday. And so if we want to get more lay involvement, well, that means we need more Eucharistic ministers and lectors and whatever. And that's not really what the Second Vatican Council had in mind. It's more this stuff. It's I need the lay people to be living the vocation in the places that they live it so faithfully. Do that and do that there and do that well. That's what the call to the lay involvement is.
And it's I like the idea of like a light, sort of like a center wick, right? The Jesus Christ is the center wick. He infuses his clergy. That clergy then lights the wicks of the relationships that they're a part of and their parish. And so it kind of stems outward that the lay are the ones that carry the fire of the Lord out through the world, right? The Holy Spirit spreads through relationship. And oftentimes, if you think you're spreading the Spirit of the Lord using only the internet, you're kind of missing the whole relationship part. He sent them 2 by 2, not 2.6 gigahertz by 5 gigahertz band, right? That was me reaching. That was a dad joke.
Well, I thought you got to chuckle out of me. But the other thing I was going to say on that, on that related note, a couple of weeks ago on Corpus Christi, I was talking about the beauty of the Eucharist. And as I was reflecting on that, normally on a normal year, I would talk about how awesome the Eucharist it is. And isn't it great that we all get to receive and Jesus, and it's a real presence, and we should be remembering this. But I couldn't say that on a live stream Mass when people aren't feeling comfortable coming, and they should. So that when I was reflecting on that, I was like, it has to mean something different. And that's what kind of inspired me to say, I need to come out and make more communion calls and do that. Now I did make a call for Eucharistic ministers too. And I got a good response, and I haven't responded. I responded to the ones that wanted to be trained, but I haven't got to everybody else. So people have been asking me a little bit about that, and I had to send out an email. But here's the thing. At the moment, I've got about 14 or so stops, which is still doable for me to do on a Sunday afternoon. And so for the moment, I'm kind of holding on to that because I think that's kind of my role. I think that bringing communion, although we love the extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion, I would kind of see that as if it gets to a point that I can't do it now myself, that's when I really want to get the extra help. At the moment, I am doing all of those myself. The other reason is I was talking to someone that I've gone to visit, is they're really concerned. That's why they're staying at home, and they want to make sure they have like a consistent minister. That's one less contact. So when I start,
it's a reflexive, right? So the reflexive of "you shall not steal" is "you shall give." and give what you can in all capacities. And with regard to the Eucharist, you're doing what you can give within the time constraints of what you're able to do. But even more so, if we, the lay, are capable of giving more, then it's not really you asking us to do it, it's the Lord. If we know in our heart we can give more, and just so you know, I'm not going into a financial risk because frankly,
I'm missing the transition here.
But really, it is that's the duty of the Christian, is to do the reflexive of the commandments, right? You shall not steal. Well, you shall give that which you are capable of giving, and especially from your gifts and talents as well. If you're a beautiful singer, share that talent with the world. Bring those gifts outward. But so much so that you don't want to be the one that. You don't want to be the fig tree, right? That's
right.
Jesus comes searching for the fruit, even though that wasn't the season for fruit, but he comes searching for it. And he says, I curse you to never bear fruit again. You don't want to be on the receiving end of that. And the goal behind this is to give of the gifts that we've been given.
Very good. Well, that pretty much wraps up then where we are today. So again, I encourage you to look through the catechism and check out great stuff there in the the reflexive. It's what can we do rather than
what can we give? Give what you can.
All right, well, let's close with a prayer then. So Heavenly Father, we thank you for the gift of this time that you have given us. We know that everything that comes from you is a gift. We ask that you would help us to use those gifts wisely and for your glory. And we give all glory to you as we pray, glory be to the Father and to the Son and to the Holy Spirit. As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, thanks so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day. I'm going to go back to the share screen right there. Well, I'm going to do that. I'm going to end it. Yes, I am going to end it. So,
a song coming on.
You got it. It's coming. There it is. Oh, I got the wrong screen. No, I got the right one. There it is.
Oh, no.
Boom, boom, boom.
Hope I didn't steal your Tuesday night.
Were we respectful of their time? I mean, I
think so.
All right, should I end it?
You should end it.
Okay, I guess I'll end it. End meeting. What? Where did it go? End meeting for all. Oh no, I'm just going to stop the share. Stop the live.
Yeah, you can do that too.